Okay, here we go. Welcome everyone to the ALYCE session. My name is Dirk Hewig. I'm the lead architect of the ALYCE platform that we implemented in Bayer. ALYCE is an abbreviation for Advanced Analytics Platform for the Clinical Environment. And I want to give you some insights today into the platform that we built the last 4 years, as well we continue to implement that platform. And the main interest, I think, is here how we do that in regulatory compliance. So I want to start to give you an overview about the business cases we implemented so far in production in the platform, how we address the qualification and regulatory validation topics on the platform, as well as I show you some technical insights, how we industrialize and automatize the platform. So 4 years ago, we started with the challenge of decentralized clinical trials. Perhaps you have heard that or also have that in your company if you are from the pharmaceutical industry and in clinical. The point was we had to process sensor data, device data, smartphone, actigraphy data, etc. Raw data that is coming from patient devices directly, and we simply had no application for that. So the point was we need some kind of capability to ingest the data, to merge the data, to wrangle, to transform the data, as well as to write it back down to our clinical systems, like our clinical databases. That was the beginning of ALYCE. And 4 years ago, we made a courage decision, I would say. We started after an RFP period directly with a Lakehouse, but I tell you more, it was more in the starting, and is it until today because of the legacy. It was more a modern warehouse approach, continuing a data lakehouse. So when you see the first use cases here that we implemented, that are already that are just now running as well, that are use cases for more or less ETL tasks. No? So we, as I said, we got activity data, sleep data, ECG data, and other data direct from vendors. And perhaps you all know, no, this is currently not standardized. So we had to deal with a lot of APIs, with a lot of non-standardized formats. And we had to put that in a way that it is efficient and that we not start from scratch anytime we ingest new data. At least as a minimum from the same vendor. For example, when you ingest actigraphy data direct, that you do not have to start from scratch when you get the next study onboarding utilizing that. So, and then we merged the data, typically transform the data and write it back to clinical data systems. In the old times, I would say that is simply ETL topics, transformation topics. So, our next business use case was medical review. This product here, what you can see, also this PowerPoint dashboard that you can see here is called Myra on the platform. Myra stands for Medical Insights, Review and Analytics. It is designed as part of the medical review process, and especially end users like medical experts should benefit from it. Compared to the situation before, it was a milestone in what we achieved with that product. That is because of the modern, let's say, dashboard and reporting capabilities, as well as that we connected it to our Lakehouse. That is an example here of, for example, an adverse events dashboard, or when you see the tabs on the side, this is here, for example, a labs dashboard. Okay, then another example, which is running on the ALYCE platform, is some statistics I choose here to show. That is called Clinical Trial Anomaly Spotter, CTAS. And it's an unsupervised tool. And when you see it perfectly fits also in such setups like the Lakehouse setups, it is technically nothing else than an R package in the end. that works on clinical study data. So you load the data, you do a little bit of pre-processing, you apply the spotter on it, and then you can visualize the results so that you have a short impression how we utilize that. Here, for example, in that example, you see a site with unusually large laboratory assay results. You see also the potential root causes for that. And that is really a good thing to have such things really set up and implemented on such a platform like ALYCE in a regulated manner, or that I will come later also unregulated as well. Depends on the use case, scenarios that you implement. So one word, we believe in the crowd. We believe also, like you saw perhaps today in the keynote, in collaboration and crowdsourcing, as well as do it in the do-it-together pattern. And what we do with that, and I want to make here a little bit marketing for my colleagues, they introduced that spotter in, I think, 22 in the Fuse. And last year, in the Impala consortium, they made it public domain. So that is on GitHub available, and you are welcome to join the party and then also to contribute. You see here a lot of pharmaceutical companies which are already part of Impala consortium and distributing to that as well. For sure, not only to the spotter here, but also to others. I put you the link here to the Git repository on the slides. Then, when we come to, let's say, very new topics like AI topics, to apply AI topics, you see, we also, that is currently in experimentation. We do here in oncology, for example, the first trials to interpret clinical figures together with large language models like GPT-4 Vision in that case, and also then treat that together with orchestrators, workflow orchestrators like LangChain. And what we see is that our general approach is also so open that we not only have to use Databricks, so we can also use Azure OpenAI, for example, because our platform is more general and is not only related to Azure Databricks in this case. So that is an impression on the business cases which we have implemented on that platform. Let's come to the validation and qualification approach. And this approach is different to our earlier approaches where we sometimes validated whole systems. The difference here in the cloud and in ALYCE is that we are distinguishing between qualification and validation. So that means the infrastructure will be qualified and the business processes on top of it will be validated in case of need. In case of need, I say, because you see here on the slide that we aim with this platform not only to support validated use cases because of the technical capabilities. You can also run, for example, early research stuff, which is not mandatory regulatory relevant. So, and then that makes it for us very straightforward to have one platform that we industrialize to use out of the box then for different purpose. So that is the idea. And I'm often asked, for example, how do you qualify all libraries which are included in Databricks environments? How do you do that? And the answer is we do that through the service. That is the idea. Because otherwise, you have a huge problem. Remember how many, for example, libraries are in a particular runtime environment of a Databricks Spark cluster. So, and when you try to, for example, to qualify all libraries, the whole tree and the dependencies inside, you have a lot to do. And the point is what what the qualification approach is doing, we are starting from the scratch. This is a global subscription qualification that is not ALYCE doing. This is the subscription, the Azure subscription in this case. You can do that one-to-one with AWS, for example, as well. The Azure subscription is globally qualified, and the ALYCE part of the qualification of the infrastructure is based on the platform services or on the software as a service services. So that means when you use, for example, Power BI, you have a software as a service service, so you have to qualify that when you are running validated use cases on top of it, if you want. And when you, for example, use Databricks as platform as a service service, you have to qualify Databricks first before you can set it up in a qualified environment in order to fulfill business value and produce results. And this is where you see the top. No? This is the idea of that is that the ALYCE products in the end are the use cases from a business point of view, which are then typically validated if it is regulated. That is the qualification and validation approach on the platform. In short words, in a nutshell. So coming to the technical parts. We started, as said, 4 years ago. That was interesting because the capabilities which, for example, Databricks has today, a lot were not available 4 years ago. For example, we needed an external orchestrator. There were no orchestrators available out of the box in Databricks 4 years ago. So, and this came out that we had the idea to set up a service landscape. In this case, what you can see here is the Azure service landscape around data analytics, and to qualify the services as per need. So this blueprint is a more or less a modern warehouse / Lakehouse blueprint that we started to implement partially and on demand. So that means we have not implemented any services from the beginning when they are not needed, but the services which you can see here are typically core services in a data analytics platform, and they are implemented more or less out of the box from the beginning. So that means when you look at that from the ingestion, ADF was implemented because we used the ADF, for the one who are not Azure familiar, is called Azure Data Factory. That is an orchestration tool in the end for especially pipelines to simplify it. And we utilized that as the orchestration and ingestion tool, especially for controlling our pipelines. So, and that is a very important piece for orchestration, this Azure Data Factory. And then we had the point to, for example, when it comes to transformation, that it is not sufficient. And then we introduced from the beginning Azure Databricks in order to do the transformations more properly and also more advanced, because you can program that, as you know, much more powerful than you can program a descriptive tool here like Azure Data Factory. That brings me to the point on another layer. Okay, the data lake was also there from the beginning. The processing layer and the orchestration layer was there from the beginning. And the data serving layer is an interesting one, because what you can see here is that I modified the slide a little bit. There is data sharing available there. There's Azure Databricks SQL interfaces available in our days, but 4 years ago we started here with a classically SQL warehouse. So we used Synapse in order to get the performance we want. And that is, for example, why it is not a pure Lakehouse, more a modern data warehouse, because until now we also have Synapse in place to serve, for example, powerful Power BI dashboards. But what we want is, we want to get rid of complexity and cost, and when it comes now to new loads, then we typically do not use synapse anymore, than going directly to the SQL warehouse approach, no? And to the Lakehouse capabilities from our days. Okay, that is this. What is also interesting, we started not from the beginning with a powerful data governance layer. The reason was it was too overwhelming. So we come from the idea delivery matters. So that we cannot wait 5 years or how long ever to deliver something. So that means when it comes to data delivery, in my opinion, it's absolute valid to start with the approach of the lake as well as the SQL warehouse. And then you put on top for sure data governance. So in our industry, without data governance, it's absolutely not possible. It is only the question how effective and how fast you can apply that on such a layer, on such a stack, no? Because the involved services are complex, and we set up on automation from the beginning. So coming to data products, how data products are set up in ALYCE. So we, from the beginning, as I said, and concentrate perhaps first on the data landing zone, we implemented a pattern that ingests the data to a so-called landing zone, and perhaps you're a little bit surprised because it's not 3 zones that you perhaps know from your medallion architecture like bronze, silver, gold. It's 4 zones because we think we had a little problem when we ingest directly in the bronze zone the raw data with all the requirements we had. So you can extend the medallion architecture however you want and need. That is not forbidden, but I think you have to take care why you do that. And the reason for us is, for example, we land and we register every ingested source data. And the first thing is we archive that in a standard way and in a guaranteed way. No? That is all you know for regulations compliance. You have to have the data flow as well the data available over decades of years. So and that we implemented standardized so that when it comes to patterns, the pattern idea of ALYCE is that you can apply it easily to the next data product as well, so that the next data product does not have to take care of that, right? Because it is already implemented and you can get it in as an implemented factory approach. So the bronze zone we are utilizing currently for first, also between the landing and the bronze zone, we do 2 things. We bring in the bronze zone the data to Delta, as well as we do first quality checks. We saw that especially some data is very poor in quality, and we found that some, let's say, at least basic technically checks is useful to apply in that early stage, because you can discuss long, is it necessary to bring that in that early stage, or do you do that between bronze and silver? We do that. And the next is we bring the data to silver zone, and all the business transformation typically comes from bronze zone to silver zone and is applied there. The silver zone is the exposed zone, and it now also is, for example, a typical question I often get, okay, where do you expose SDTM, for example? And we do that in the silver zone because we think SDTM data, for example, is often the starting point for further aggregation. So when I give you the example of Myra, for example, when we create out of that data other data models like medical review models, then we see the medical review model as a gold layer. So the aggregated data is then the MRM model and not the underlying data that is coming out the SDTM. And that is a reason why it's currently published in silver. So, and in the gold layer as said, then for sure the aggregated golden source of truth is populated and normally currently served virtually. Look at the metadata framework config store a little bit. That is an interesting approach. Oh, I have to hurry up a little bit. The metadata config store we developed is only a config store for controlling the pipeline, also the data product pipeline pattern, because what we want is we want to steer the pipeline completely parameterized. For example, what configuration of clusters the pipeline is using. We want to pass in the pipeline before and while running it, so that we can optimize the pipeline for each cluster we want to utilize. Now, for example, that is one. We have, for example, mapping information. You all know currently, also the ones who are doing it with storage, with external storage, you have to write the table somewhere. No? So you need the information of the path where you write to, especially when you have different environments. Then you can never work with static code. So you have to parameterize that. So everything that belongs, for example, to this data product pipeline pattern for the generalized pipeline is parameterized from this metadata framework. But only that metadata is in that ADF config store. And the idea is then, for example, that you have the code, you want to change in production, a notebook, for example, to apply another transformation in this pipeline, then you can do this with an operational change, we call that, by only changing the parameter. Because the parameter is passing in the notebook which is used in the end. No? So you can dynamically switch the behavior of the pipeline. Here you see that is only an impression. No? That is an ADF orchestrator. You don't need to look into the details, but you can imagine it's a complex one. No? That is generalized pipeline approach, which means this is a generalization for a lot of data sources in order to orchestrate the data through the zones. And when we look a little bit more into the details here, then the interesting thing is how does this orchestrator work, related especially to Databricks transformation notebooks. We have a parent and a child pipeline. The parent pipeline does nothing else as to load all the metadata. You use what I explained. You do the lookup, and you get all the metadata you need for your pipeline run. And a second thing is on the parent. You can decide a manual run or an event triggered run. So you can run the pipelines in both cases, automated and manual. And then on the child side, you see the logic which I explained, how the Databricks notebooks are passed in, also between landing and bronze zone, between bronze and silver zone, and also what's here also interesting is we have a separate pipeline controlling the Unity catalog exposure. What we can do with that is we can separate control what is exposed and how exactly it is exposed in Unity. And the reason for that is that we want to have exactly control about the Unity exposure. And it is in CI/CD automation programmed so that nobody does that manually. So you need it traced. For example, I give an example. You want to change an access permission on data. And you want to do that not manually. Your data steward does not want that. You want to do that by code. Then what we do is we change the configuration in code. It is in Git, and then it is just passed by a run of an operational pipeline. and you do not need a release for it, no? Because in regulation, you have always, you have a lot the problem that you cannot do releases every day. But you have to do adaptations every day. So when my business say, here, we need new access, then you have to give this access, and you have to do it regulatory compliant. So that means that you have to trace exactly everything and that you do it in automation. And we think it is also possible to do it different. We think that it is a good way to do it programmatically, so that all the configurations can be reflected also in the Git. So that means there's no credentials in the Git or so, only the configuration, right? So when you say you set a new security group in Azure Entra security group, access to particular data, you save the idea of the group and pass it in through the automation to the production environment. So then the data management landing zone, that is an interesting zone. That is what we are currently investigating a lot in. The data management landing zone is all about governance and the metadata. So, and the data quality observation as well. There, we currently work conceptual as well as we try to implement a few things, like, for example, Unity Catalog, as I think as far as most of you do as well. The point is, often what I see is a tooling-based approach, I call it. For example, I see then tools like Colibra, and they said, oh, we have a catalog, and they say, okay, how is your catalog structured? How is it modeled? And I think one of the things is when you go from a Lakehouse to a more, for example, to a fabric approach or also to a data mesh approach, that does not matter, that you have to do it in both. You have to think, for example, as one important piece, how you structure your catalog. And in my opinion, there are two ways to do that on the top level. That is along business capabilities or business processes. And around that, as you can see, you can structure your data sources and your assets on. Because that is not given by a tool. No? How you structure the catalog, how you model your business, that you have to do by your company, or it is already done. And often, when technical people do that, you often see a catalog only with data assets in, for example. So the next thing is, I'm also a little bit in the business from IT, and the requirements changes. So when you look at this data management topic, in my opinion, two things are very important. And also when you look at the personas who are affected, let's say a data scientist is affected or a data analyst is affected, the point is good to understand how they work, what their expectations are, and what you need to support. And in the end, it is search. But the search is different. The first thing is, and we have also difficulties sometimes in it, did you hear in the past, I cannot find the asset in my company, I cannot find it. I'm sure it's there, I cannot find it. That is searching for data. And that is typically where data scientists struggle. So that means the searching for data is the first thing you have to think how you implement that and to guarantee that. It's not only to search in data, because searching in data, that is also clear, that is a top discipline of data scientists. They can do that because they know exactly how to look in data, but they struggle often to find data. So, and that is something when you set it up, especially in a more complex scenario, what you typically have in enterprises or in huge companies, also at least in our company, for example, we have only in pharma R&D challenges with 3 catalogs that we have technically to implement. That is Unity Catalog for sure, then it is Purview because we use the Azure Stack and we cannot rely only on Purview, and the R&D overall catalog is Colibra. So you can then imagine that it is not trivial to integrate that. So here I wanted to give you a short example how we experiment with the Unity catalog and with AI capabilities that is currently not in production. I think perhaps you have seen that in the conference as well. The first, in my opinion, and most straightforward things to look to is when you want to go to AI capabilities with your data, to enrich them with metadata. And I was very impressed, and that is why I showed that here, how good the out-of-the-box capabilities from Databricks are. Because when you see that sample here, that is an SDTM adverse events table as an example. So, and then I say apply metadata on it. And what you can see on the slides is the out-of-the-box without any, so you would not sense it in production. But without any data steward, without any knowledge, this is the enrichment of Databricks of an adverse event table from an SDTM model. And I was impressed on the quality out of the box on it, because that in the end is a way then, for example, to get easier access to natural language processing that you want to achieve then perhaps in the near future. So then, the last technical slide, that is the automation approach from the ALYCE platform. The automation approach, I told you, is CI/CD based and always in the paradigmas of DevOps, DataOps, MLOps, LLMOps, so you know that. The products which are applying ALYCE product pattern have to work in that automation engineering style. And what we, from the beginning, has guaranteed is that we separate the infrastructure. Because I said in the beginning when I explaining the platform, we qualify the infrastructure. So we decouple the infrastructure from anything else. So we have the left side, you see the infrastructure pipeline. That is only a partial, that is a small partial screenshot here from our pipeline setting up standardized, for example, Databricks pieces and infrastructure. And I've also asked this often, why are you using not GitHub? The reason is because we are using Azure DevOps for different capabilities, as well as we have not good experiences with such things like direct dependencies, for example, to a particular platform, like when you use GitHub Actions. So what you see here is most of it is really scripted and CLI or REST API based. So that runs anywhere. If your company says tomorrow, we are moving from GitLab to GitHub, and then we are moving to the next, then you are sure that your code runs tomorrow as well. So, and that was the reason why it is implemented in that way. And Azure DevOps Stack has a few other advantages. For example, modern requirements availability as a plugin for doing advanced stuff in it. The data pipeline. This is more or less, the data pipeline is our approach to data ops. So in short words, all artifacts what are passed, and not the data, only the artifacts. So the data factory artifacts, the notebooks, that are all processed by the data pipeline. And the infrastructure and the data pipelines are totally decoupled. So that means if you want to modify your pipeline, you have to run the data pipeline only. For example, you want to change the orchestration, right? Then you do that typically in a release. And when you do that, then you can decide which DevOps pipelines are affected to run in order to achieve your result. Perhaps you do not have to change the infrastructure, then you can skip the infrastructure run. The next is the access pipeline and the operational change pipeline. And these both pipelines are relating to daily operations, mainly. They can only treat it on releases as well, as on official releases you do. But the operational change pipeline and the access pipelines, they are both they are both designed in order to daily work modifications. For example, access modifications. You have to apply a new security policy that you would do with the operational change policy, or you change your metadata framework, for example. So then when you look at that, you want to modify the metadata framework as well. We do that also by pipelines. So that is the summary slide. What are the takeaways? So we observed, together with our business, we were tenfold faster compared to the fast and medical review with that approach, and that is a lot in pharma. The reason is why, because we automized a lot, and also I have not talked so much about the efforts about the documentation. The documentation approach significantly reduces, because one principle is when the core platform does the qualification once and you apply as a data product the same, you inherit automatically the qualification and you only need to document the deviations. And that means, let's say the core platform template is there and Myra or another product is setting up an own product platform, then it does not have to do the qualification, for example, of Databricks, because the Databricks qualification was already done. And you inherit all the qualification which were done, except you do deviations from the platform. And that is a huge advantage, because then all the stuff, for example, from infrastructure qualification, you do not have to do anymore as a data product. You have only to do your validation documentation. So I would say I end up here. A few minutes left for questions. Thank you.